Jai Meher Baba. Continuing with Stay with God by Francis Brabazon. We're now up to Book 5, which is The God Man as World Axis and Living Perfection of Art, the Divine Sun of Reality shining through the mists of illusion. And in Book 5, we're up to Part 3 now. Book 5, Part 3. 1. Return, O man, O brother and sister of me. Return, O myself, before the tide turns at his speaking, and we are carried by his Noah's flood whitherward like fools, drunk in an open boat on the ocean, to the way of art and God. Stay with God, for he is not only the Almighty Creator, but our brother and friend. His counsel is better than the wit of men, for he is deathless and men are born to die. He is knowledge and existence, and knows all the paths to him, and leads those by the short path who surrender their path to him. He stirs up and urges forward. He retards and holds back till the right time. He drives one on to glorious victory. He hurls another into defeat. Andromache shall not receive of thee Hectopelides' glorious arms, for this would be to rob Thetis of victory whom God had promised. Two, art is a statement in praise. His craft in us, fashioning us in likeness of himself. The perfect masters, his consummate works, the saints nearing completion, us, his beginnings. He is the only singer. He sings the creation, and his singing supports and destroys it. As poet, he gives us scriptures for our guidance. In the saints, he sings his own praises and dances because he loves dance. He builds cathedrals and temples and mosques, carving their columns in exact variety, cuts and paints figures of himself on their walls for his love of proportion, and his textbooks for us of right living. His is the only iconography of the real. That of ourselves that we do is from the labored breathing of unseeing, unhearing, and divisional thinking, dreamers depicting in dream a monstrous confusion of dreaming. Three, a tree is a tree. It is not creative, but reproductive. A man is a man, and likewise creates nothing. The image is already in the stone, the bridge in steel, awaiting revealment and spanning at the word of God in a man's hand. Mind, which prompts us, we are the doer, is a mirror house. of distorting in which self is deluded by being imaged as everything other than self. A man, as a man, can cease from foolishness and begin to love, begin to repeat the name of God in his heart, seek in his heart the beloved's lovely face, wait patiently for a word or a note or some intimation of his form, and make his many notes and words and outlines pleasing to love's ears and eyes. Only one become one may create. 4. The only reason for reviving painful experiences is to mature one's outlook, not feed excitement in others, sowing in them the seed of future pain, excusing it as legitimate communication. And he who was to become the Buddha, the inspirer of his time, the rest and the spring of men for the next 500 years, was sheltered from pain until his mature mind could grasp it and subdue it. Being dragged through hell by the heels or dreaming in one dream a star in lieu of a ripening breast. I'd leave her a kiss on the mouth, she said, sprawling a nude across a canvas in rebellion or peopling dead woods with faded musk of dryad, and neither material nor impetus for art. Where is the Brahman who taught me? What splinters of Brahma, by the grace of the true teacher, might have informed them? Five. God made sense turn outward. Therefore, man looks out. Now and again, a daring man looks back and finds himself. Now and again, after becoming God, he speaks. This speaking is the first art. Often on the homeward track, as the divine image becomes clear in outline and volume, he sings its praises. This is the second art. The lover drowning in the sweetness of love's smile. A Jesus, the way, and Ali, a door. Now and again, a man sees, by God's grace, God in another man and dares surrender himself to him. Becomes clay in the master's hands to be molded into truly human form, or canvas for a new portrait, truthful in line, exact in volume, and lovely in content. Six. The art of God and his finished works, the living men. Ramadeva said, my glory is like the mountain tops. Lao Tzu said, how I glory on the breast of my mother. Hui Neng said, you read it to me, I'll tell you what it means. Ibn Arabi said, my heart is a pasture for gazelles and a convent for monks. Sri Hamsa said, I am an instrument played on by the divine hand. Inayat Khan said, everywhere I look, I see thy winning face. Francis said, brother's son, and he wasn't poetizing. One said, every day a new heaven is under my feet. One said, two that are your masters are my slaves. One said, circumambulate me and your pilgrimage is finished. Attar said, the road was but myself towards myself. Above these, alone in self-perfected glory, and who alone directly comes down, is God's avatar. Seven. Our works are but a crying toward these men, a cry from bondage to their pure release, a movement in the dark towards their light, like leaves and twigs and branches in the night, moved by the wind and dreaming of the sun, a turning. Once, when we knew singing in delight, spontaneously as flowers to the sky, making our world around us glad with song, now with remorse and tearings and reaching back to that which holds us like roots of grass uptorn with a chisel plow clinging to earth, like drinkers drunk still clinging to the glass, or merely petulant as children called at mealtime still wanting play, excursionists returning weary, wanting more. Eight. The word also is food. Therefore the real artists meditated on the word and trusted them by their teacher, and disciplined their seeing to his form till their eyes, brightened with tears and praise, escaped them. Then at his command they in their turn spoke to the people in words or notes or line or chisel plain, and the people were astonished, and being thus fed in their turn with the word of their work, the earth and the breath of God through the masters and saints brought the rains and the sun in due season. And when floods came or drought, they did not huddle in fear or curse the sky, but looked into their hearts to find the sin, and adjusted their sacrifice to the laws of nature and God. Nine. Without a word of the word in one's heart, without a reflection of his light, whose seventh shadow is the physical sun in one's eyes. That is, without the sacrifice having been made which is savored to God, no food nourishes, but is poison which paralyzes. and finally kills us to our essential self. With bricks of dead tissue do we build our vast hospitals. With the steel of maimed minds do we forge the knife which performs the operation. The world of nature, helpless from our helplessness, weeps. And from her overmuch tears roll the floods, and from her shame and burning shines the sun of drought. Weeping and burning is nature because of our heedlessness, and the winds, finding no home, return to God. Ten. So the artist, if he is to sing or write or paint or play in truth, in praise of love, may not himself, but first find the golden thread by which he moves, the lovely note from which he has continuous becoming. Then find the holder of the thread, the lovely singer, and offer him his body, speech, and mind in service, nor asking in return the gift of art or anything. For even this finding and surrenderance is by grace, grace which puts one under eternal obligation of repayment. Heaven and earth move by the word alone, and it moves out from silence. The mover is the perfect master, who holds the thread which binds each one together in one gathered piece of movement, who sings the song which is our sighs and tears, our well-directed thought and sudden laughter. 11. Once we knew the lovely form and voice of art, and trained our children to read its messages, cut in wind and fire and earth and sculpted in fullness in the human form, taught them the true sacrifice, thou, taught them the times of sowing grain in the earth, grain in the heart and their proper tendance, taught them the facts of irrigation of body, mind, and earth, taught them the true scales and modes, taught them the name of God, that name in us which made our songs, which danced before his altars in our hearts and guided our hands in cutting his memorials. But even then, at times, the blood, carrier of light, darkened and we lost our way. Then we prayed and offered the firstborn of our loves, and he came with his shining love again and retrued our vision and retaught his name. "12. So to Muhammad's time, a journey continuous from us to God, and direct from God to us, and for 1,000 years after, when the twilight of our present night set in, and we no longer worked and loved with our eyes upon the image in our hearts, we looked out and stared at the horizon, blank with the promise of release from our restricted forms. We looked out and set out to know whither, with oars creaking in rowlock and flag hoisted beyond sail at masthead, wave beating the waves that beat upon our ships, scurvy and lice-ridden, our beards and eyes wet with salt of strange seas, and our weeping, not for yellow gold and fine silks and new foods to glut our glutting, but for a new God to enthrone above God, one greater than Jesus and Mohammed, who would not require of us sacrifice and prayer. "13. And we easily found him, since he was also looking for us. In fact, he had accompanied us in our laborious ships and appeared on the land before us when we landed and greeted us and initiated us into service. His name was Ares, and his bedfellow Aphrodite. And they showed us the new altar building and its rites. But our seamen, thick-muscled fools of the oar, still clung to Jesus, and we would sometimes come upon them, secretly remembering him. So we slew Jesus on Ares' altar, and told the men he had died, but that his spirit would be upon them if they yielded us good service. Christ, Ares, two, but in reality one. And Aphrodite's city to sack for our pleasure. And to please our men, we wrote them a book with tunes in it they could easily sing. "14. But because the word of God may not be denied, the words of his word, love one God and thy neighbor, think, speak, and act truthfully, and have compassion on all things." Not only did lovely art become lost to us, lost along symphonic horizons and among boudoir pianos and mulish metrics, but nature herself, ever loving and dutiful to God, and weeping for his dear son pierced by arrows and thorns and bruised by stones, revolted, assumed new forms of terrible disease, rained floods, burnt the lands with drought, gave earth's choicest soils back to the oceans, and poisoned the last drops of the divine springs of human affection, so that the tender word now only growls in our throats, and love's glance freezes in our eyes or bulges belligerency, and our no parents' children sweep the pavements with their eyelashes looking for God. "15. With Renaissance we denied the saint of us, left the house of love, and marched out, offending the earth with our shod feet and trumpets, and settled in lands and occupied ourselves feeding the swine of appetite, broke ourselves off from the tree of knowledge, and planted the branch in sour soil where it withered and died, peeled ourselves off from the stem of sweet nourishment, and found it trash in our hand. We made instruments of dissection and measurement to examine our condition and ask of the stars, built ships and planes and journeyed round the earth and into the skies and asked them, and drooled our non-finding in poetry and music, and painted our wretchedness into portraits of caricature, turned our universities into distribution centers of work tickets, and sent armies back to our parent house to loot its treasury, 16. And our elder brothers looked up from their work and greeted us, and found themselves facing relentless steel and red fire. And we opened the doors of the first room of their treasury, which contained the coins of manual energy. And the fire of our eyes blazed and entered into the coin, and we loaded it into our ships and brought it home, little knowing that it was impregnated with fire, that it was Medea's bridal gift of burning. But it was a burning without smoke and flame, a secret burning which inflamed our desolation, fed riot in the blood, consumed our nerve ends, and smoldered our bones. But we were not knowing this, as we were busy smelting an image of a new god, son of Ares, of unlimited power, called nuclear fission. "17. In the meantime, back home in the house they had built, according to the plans and specifications laid down by their father, the natives were continuing their tribal ways of song and dance and instructing their children in the arts of seeing, understanding, and memory, tempering the intellect of their youth so that it could not be affected by fire, establishing in their breath the living word and enthroning in their hearts the true God. Then the father chose 3 sons so trained and sent them to us with weapons of love to take up the war we had started. And their names were Vivekananda, Kumaraswamy, and Inayat Khan. And the sword of the first made music like the deep notes of a cello, and the second like a fugal, violin, and the third the haunting tones of a primitive flute. Contemptible history, narrative of wars and earth betrayals, iron-shod feet on earth's breast, steel in her entrails, fire of the hearth, gift of Prometheus, burning, burning. Never a chapter or line on the tempered steel of the plainsmen's intellects, and the fire in their hearts melting the bones of limitation. No accounts of terrible ocean crossings, storm-whipped and calm-bound, and rhapsodies of further shore arrivings. Theme of Iliad, Ramayana, and all true books of history. No histories in textbooks for children of Kailas and Mecca. Pilgrimages, of building of Borobudur, of Greek and Allura stone cutting, for love, alone for love. No lives of King Janaka and Prince Milarepa and Prince Chaitanya and forsaken Princess Mira. No development of devotion from Krishna's flute playing and Siva's making the first veena. "19. Contemptible history. Jesus its dateline and denial of his frequent and each time perfect descents. He is the unsubtractable, the unadditional. Only a shout and a shock, or a whisper of stirring, a candle or a sun, a little clearance of my direction, or a divine beloved in whom I become annihilate to individual men. Contemptible history which teaches evolution of consciousness and growth of religion. Never was a time since he unrolled his illusion of universes, which is now, and himself pierced the illusion when men did not know him, become his brightness and art, and themselves pour out his unending song over the earth. And he raised five to equalness with him in his godhood, and set he himself them to watch over men, and when need, call him his avatar down for their awakening and direction. "20. At one time he was called Jesus, at another Mohammed, at one time Krishna, at another Buddha. Each time was a shining and a piercing of the gathered clouds of ignorance, and showing men their man way to perfection, the way of truth and fellowship and lovely art, himself the demonstration of its conclusion, and at the same time reaffirming to the ant his ant way, and to birds bird way, to all creatures he themselves him. The same sun was merely the gladness of one, another it burned to ashes so that he became God. The same wind was a whispering breeze in the sheltered valley, and a gale on the tops of the mountains. The same love, to one was a touch in his dream slightly remembered, to another the kiss which initiated final union. Jimmer Baba. Continuing with Stay with God by Francis Brabazon, Statement in Illusion on Reality. We're up to Book 5, The God-Man as World Axis and Living Perfection of Art, the Divine Sun of Reality shining through the mists of illusion. And we're halfway through Book 5 and Part 3, so we're up to stanza 21. Jai Baba. As Jesus, he had to get himself crucified, since earth is the junction of heaven and hell, in order to get his words fulfilled and establish his word. As Krishna, he had to get shot with an arrow and allow the abduction of the gopis, since his business had been with arrows and flute playing, and beauty is always violated by the world in order to establish love. As Buddha, he had to eat poisoned food, since he was a mendicant begging his food, in order to uphold his doctrine of transiency and demonstrate compassion to everyone and thing. As Muhammad, he had to get stoned, since he lived as a man among men in a world of stones, in order to establish in men's hearts democracy. As Baba, he has had to get involved in car accidents, since he has come to a world of machines, in order to break the backbone of machines as materiality and establish their proper usage in man's spiritual life. "22. After Siva, Mahanirvana Sutra to take the place of an obsolete yoga. After Krishna, the Bhagavatas, in order to clean up the Brahman mess of misunderstood sacrifice. After Buddha, Socrates and his son Plato, to keep the same light that was in Homer the pure burning, through the murk that was setting in with the betrayal of poetry, to the time of Jesus, after whom the desert men living as Jesus told men to live, naked, homeless, solitary, all well forsaken for God in order to counteract priesthood and political organization and Paul's doctrine of interference, and Gregory and Ambrose to link up with the Sufis who were after Muhammad in order to prevent the 72 jarring sects from completely obscuring his word, so that it could again establish lovely art in people's lives. '23. With Baba, God speaks, and He's speaking. Again, sun, piercing clouds, and full shining in clear sky and hearts of men, awakened in lovely art, and her maidens treading the dance on the green earth, and men amazed at the forms and rhythms of the dance, and with artworks and speech and worship and walking, and the walking of lovers in twilight hushed with bond of hymn, and children again being instructed in the alphabets of love's speech, and men again marching with battle songs in the holy war of self, and conquering and returning and stone cutting and building and stripping away the scaffolding of flesh, revealing lovely edifices of his name, and speech swift as thought, unhampered by labor of words, and thought instant with reality, earth a carpet of eyes for his feet in the lives of men. '24. Mohammed, the Democrat. There is one God, and He is in your hearts. He alone you should adore and obey. Hold Him above everything and one else. And Francis of Assisi was his true apostle, although he was calling him Jesus out of habit, because he had said with him, "Poverty is my glory," bride to him, and was a true fakir, a one-robed man, shoeless with clean feet. Then came the humanists, deluded that freedom was outside themselves, the beginning of false democracy, who shouted horizons and taught us to seek a new God, one greater than Mohammed and Jesus, who would not require of us via dolorosa and prayer to wipe clean the mirror for the image, and whom we easily found because he was also looking for us. And line, the boundary of the boundless, became thick with our blood. '25. To what, O teachers of men, Are you bridges to your pupils? To spacemen who will rule the earth? Bridges to further from God? Your teaching has desolated the earth, shorn the mountains of grandeur, silted the rivers of sweet water, and turned the green places into deserts. The earth is no longer sufficient sphere for the influence of your power. Now you would inhabit the moon with desolation, set in the skies the eye of your God to report men. You have made barren the heart, so that song no longer arises from the people's labor. You have made intellect feeble, so that their minds can no longer grasp God alone is, and I am He. You have dissected spirit and taught it merely sense behavior. Bridges indeed you are, bridges to the last slavery, divine men who manas, as automata for automation. "26. You have taught us who range the plains of power, who were the sons who shouted when the stars danced, to deny our Father and renounce our heritage. Taught us the non-humanity of desolation, a sneer in the vestibule, a giggle in the dark, a stare and a blink in the sunlight, and a counting of figures to take another's life, a groveling in dirt to make a machine, to conquer emptiness and destroy ourselves. The bright ones of God ever showed us the way to ourself, ever held up a mirror in which shone our loveliness, ever sang to us the cradle songs of our beginning, chanted the story of self-conquest and returning and arrival and abiding in our own perfection, ever whispered deliciously in our ears, "You are God." You are God. You are God. 27. The greatness of Dante was not in his vision of the three worlds, but in his experience of Beatrice. The greatness of Beethoven was not in his symphonic embracements, but in the quartet and piano communings with his beloved. When love approaches a man, he becomes silent, except for thou. From thou arises millions of words, or notes which he weaves into patterns pleasing to his beloved's ear. The world now knows not this art. There is a way which the masters proclaim, which the saints enjoy, in which the artist, with the industry of a child, plays and prattles, the beginning of love's speech. As he grows older, his father sends him out into the world of the way, where he becomes a hero, and gives him work to do by which he becomes an artist of self. "28. There is no way without an already knower of the way. No unveiling from ignorance to truth without an unveiler. Even Avatar requires someone to unveil him to himself, to awaken him to his self-appointed divine mission. It is evident that Jesus was naming John as his master when he berated them. What went you out to see? A reed shaken by the wind? No man born of woman is greater than he. And in this saying, he was also explaining the difference between man-God and God-man. John was a man who had become God. Jesus was God who had become a man. Both equal in consciousness, both perfectly God, each with a different role in God's affairs in the world. '29. O Son, when will you break through the encircling night of our day, cherish our hearts, spill gladness and set our feet dancing in your holy way, blossom your azure? O Sun, burn with your diamonds our web of fears, not our tears, alone our full cup of measureless measure. O Sun, the earth is ripe for budding, new treasure. The heavens await a new studying of instant pleasure, of your light for you. When will you break our sleep and dreaming, our holy feet awake? '30. Food, food. The best men of us dreamed of a world without hunger. But we are very hungry, God. Our symphonies and cinema and serials and sightseeing do not feed us. Our social sciences do not sustain us in health. We live longer, but with less sap in our sinews. Hunger, hunger. From belly hunger, from vitamin lack, to God hunger from word and form in heart lack. And the children scavenge for crumbs in the garbage cans of our frustration. Hunger, crops of hungers, hungers for which we have names, and nameless hungers. Our hunger weakens our will to seek food and causes us to reject whatever morsels of touch and glance and living culture of other peoples are offered us. Kailas, thy stone-cut frescoes, food, food, the food of your word, Baba, the spear of food of your silence breaking and speaking. 31. The science of the self, the art of realization, the only truly human occupation, to teach which God descends again and again, suffers our limitation, and allows his own crucifixion. Bright God, bright brightness of God, the beginning, the course, and the end of all science, the model, the maker, and the made work of all art. Teach us the science of self-forgetfulness. Teach us the art of your name. Nameless are we because of names, homeless because of homes, workless in works, artless in artifice. Our eyes without sight, our hands without skill, our ears stopped through the whir of words and machines. Sing to us anew your ancient singing. Show us again the pristine loveliness of your face. Renaissance, the dawn, cold dawn from which arose and shone only a fitful winter sun soon to decline and leave our world tonight, night of coal and oil, of noise level exchanged for voices and guitars. But in anticipation of our present time when the wheat of song would be withered in its roots, we invented the symphony and camera and tape recorder and recorded the folk song and sculpture still in the world, so that we would not know that we could no longer hear and see. Cold dawn, short, fitful day, and then black night in which we built cathedrals to Ares in New York and other places, abstracted God to a code of industrial ethics, and shook hands and backslapped our bargain, and bubbled whiz to found a new world on the moon. "33. But God is watchful, compassionate. He, in the perfect five, witted the times, the loss of song in the earth and mirth in men's eyes, and naked nature weeping in her desolations. And he brought himself down wrapped in his veil of form, reared him with his mother tenderness, kissed him between the eyes, and made him know himself as the Ancient One, formless, beyond all beyonds, all-knowing, all bliss, and established him as his avatar for the salvation of men and renewal of earth. Then he hid himself behind the veils of heart within each one, within each beast and bird and insect and every atom of matter, as a sun in winter rising behind cloud veils and waiting the time in time to break through in shining. "34. And he began calling his disciples and training them to obedience, and inuring them to heat and cold and thirst and sleeplessness. For great as was our cry and wretchedness, so great his work, so fit his workers to withstand our heats of greed, coldness of love, and our deserts and night. He was a moon of tenderness in their well-being, a sun of burning in their tempering, smoothing the troubled lines of their hearts and melting their souls in attunement. And he took them out on the roads, for him the beginning of his earth wanderings, for them to learn they were homeless, and he was their home. In each step he breathed in their breath his name till they knew they were nameless, and that namelessness has name. Walked in their walk, taking their burdens lightly upon him till they knew they walked with God. "35. Then he erected a scaffolding of hospital and dispensary, shelters for the migrant and poor, and a school of love for boys, for his building of selfless service in men's hearts. And when the building was completed, he removed the scaffolding and took his disciples out on the road again. This time, he traveled to the outposts of the world, Europe and America, later also to Australia, feeding the poor of us, the belly-fat poor, and the God poor of us wherever he went. Contacted his agents. For the Americas, a Red Indian in New Mexico. For Europe, a man in Rome. He spent a night in a cave his servant Francis had used. That servant, so beloved that he had made him as perfect as himself, is perfect, and visited Avila, still retaining sanctity, where John and Teresa had loved and worked for him. 36. And returned to India, where he turned his love towards the children of God, the saints and musts who live on pavements and in hovels by the shelterless wayside, turned his love to them as a great teacher and artist returning from public lectures turns the ripe fullness of his experience and love to his pupils, his fellow workers. Ali Shah Nur Patan, Chacha, God drowned, wearing a body he didn't know about. Chatti Baba, moon singer of glorious song. Karim Baba, sun man and ruler. Mohammed, heart melter with his singing. Ali Shah, great child who smoked cigarettes continuously. Pulwala, who wove garlands of flowers and adorned himself, but a sun man, who with a slap could take you to sight of God, Ulokola, king of musts, whose reputation was great because he could cross rivers unaided, but none knew his real authority. 37. Peer Fazal Shah, adept pilgrim, aged but hale, who said, "No one before has so pierced my heart with love." Moti Baba, loved and revered by harlots. Nawab Ali Shah, who gave the disciple presents when he knew he was God's emissary. Kadir Sahib, sometimes master, sometimes drowned. Nasiban Mastani, of singing guitars. Mastani Mai, whose eyes were arena in adoration of her Lord. Maulvi Sahib, chargeman of Madras. Waliji, who was ordered to loose Gadavari's waters at Nasik and did so. Gaj Maharaj, who brought Vithoba Baba to Pandarpur and assembled 70,000 by the river in the moonlight, singing in chorus the praises of the living God. These are the names of a few of the sun and moon men and women whom Baba embraced and forwarded, and, he said, worked within his universal work. "38. Now he entered his great seclusion of 40 days, curtain in his divine play, between the two acts of glory and helplessness. And with the first act established in the hearts of the audience in potentiality of being, stepped lightly onto the stage for Act 2, inviting whomso to join him. Those who did must be dead, who have no further connection with the living, ask no more questions, and need no provisions for the journey of no reward, for love, for dear love. And when the glorious morning of their going dawned, they set forth gloriously, and they sang a new song, the song of helplessness and hopelessness. This is the end of my beginning and the beginning of my end. And on the pilgrim road of this act he enacted for its establishment in us that trial which all who would know self must pass through, the destruction of mind which stands between ourselves and truth. "39. And when mind was gone, his old life of knowledge, strength, and greatness were, but he kept also, by his own act of keeping, the ignorance and weakness and humility of the new. Then was he at the same time himself and us. And so arose in him life, free and obligationless, the life of master and servant, of knowledge that we are all eternally one, indivisible and infinite in essence, but separate in ignorance. Life of strength in knowledge and weakness in binding desires. And this led to the tripartite life of complicated free life in which bindings dominated freedom, full free life in which freedom dominated bindings, fiery free life wherein both freedom and bindings were consumed in the fire of divine love. Now was there a complete blending of God's state and man's state in which the one lived not in opposition to the other, neither did one encroach upon the province of the other, and the divine truth of his realization is shared with those who sought it. Now was the time to say he was the Ancient One, highest of the high, which he did, and taught the people and warned them that if they too thought this, never to ask of him favors and miracles. They were the whims and duties of saints. He, as the Lord of creation, had already appointed what is. Seek me not to put off from you your troubles, but find me in order to surrender yourself to me. Make my happiness your cheer and my comforts your rest. Do not expect me to cure your afflictions, but your ignorance. Beg me not to save your life, but to permit you to lay down your life at my feet. Thus he consoled them and encouraged them to also become perfect. And he called his disciples and workers together at Meherabad, the first place of his worldly work, for a month to enjoy his company. For the time was near when he would speak the word of his speaking.
خطوار يا لا 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 حبيبي واه يا لا 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 نديري لا 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 حبيبي واه واه لا 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 نديري وصوتكم بكيك ونبكي معاك وياه يا نبحر عليا يا ولدي يا الله صوتك ونبكيك ونبكي معاك وياه انا بحر عليا يا والسرقيلة يا لا 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 حبيبي واه يا لا 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 نديري لا 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 حبيبي واه واه لا 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 نديري 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 واه لكن نقول كي نهضر امي عندي يزهر وياه اللي نهدي مراه يا قلبي ما نرد وياه ونروح ونجي وباش غميتي وياه انا بحر عليا يوم حدي لا 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 حبيبي واه لا 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 نديري لا 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 حبيبي واه لا 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 نديري سامحوني وكلمة ربي نقولها وياه ربيت عليك الكذاب على جيت وياه سامحوني كلمة الحق نقولها وياه ربيت عليك الكذاب على جيت وياه لا 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 حبيبي واه لا 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 نديري لا 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 حبيبي واه لا 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 نديري يلي عقلي جامعك وياه انا حي عليا يا ولدي يا اله حنسيت يلي عقلي جامعك وياه انا بحر عليا يا والسرقيلة لا 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 حبيبي واه لا 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 نديري لا 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 حبيبي واه لا 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 نديري يا براسي ومن عمل والسيلة وياه يا براسي وليك غادي ندير وياه يا براسي ومن عمل والسيلة وياه الحياة ليا يوم حديلة لا 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 حبيبي واه لا 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 نديري لا 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 حبيبي واه لا 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 نديري يبكون تمخديم شنون وياه وربي يهديك يلي عقلي جامعك وياه يبكون تمخديم شنون وياه حملا يلي عقلي جامعك وياه لا 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 حبيبي واه لا 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 نديري لا 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 حبيبي واه لا 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 نديري لا 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 حبيبي واه لا 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 لا